Before light switches, glowing screens, and endless noise, nights were darker, slower, and strangely kinder to the mind. This is not a dramatic story. Nothing rushes here. It is simply life as it once unfolded, quietly, patiently, when darkness was natural, sleep was earned, and evenings belonged to stillness rather than electricity. Before we begin, if you enjoy calm history, slow storytelling, and gentle bedtime journeys, please subscribe to the channel and let this quiet world return to you each night. The night settles slowly, not with a click or a sudden glow, but with a gradual softening of the sky. Long before electricity learned how to hum inside walls, darkness arrived like a familiar guest, never hurried, never unwelcome. People noticed night because they had to. The sun did not vanish abruptly. It lowered itself with care, pulling the day away inch by inch. As the last light faded, colors thinned into muted shades. Fields became silhouettes, rooflines blurred. The air cooled just enough to be felt on the skin. This was the signal. Day was finished, not because a clock said so, but because the world itself had spoken. Inside modest homes, windows reflected the final pale blue of evening. Curtains were drawn early, not to block artificial glare, but to keep warmth close and insects outside. The sounds of the day softened. Tools were set down. Animals settled. Footsteps slowed as people returned along dirt paths, each step familiar, unhurried. Someone struck a match. The sound was brief and intimate, a soft scratch followed by a breath of flame. It flared uncertainly, then steadied, leaning into the wick of an oil lamp. Light emerged, not bright, not commanding, but loyal. It did not conquer the room. It simply claimed a small circle, leaving the rest in gentle shadow. Life before electricity lived within these circles of light. People drew their chairs closer, bodies angled inward, hands occupied with quiet tasks. A woman mended fabric, needle flashing softly. A man cleaned tools, movements practiced and slow. Children listened more than they spoke, learning the shapes of stories from voices rather than pictures. Shadows moved along the walls, stretched and reshaped by every small gesture. Nothing buzzed, nothing blinked. The light remained steady as long as it was fed, and when it dimmed, it did so honestly, warning those nearby that the night was deepening. Outside, the world did not disappear. It became louder in different ways. Crickets began their measured rhythm. Wind brushed against trees. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then decided it had said enough. These sounds were not distractions, they were companions. Time behaved differently then. Without electric light pushing the night away, evenings shortened naturally. People felt tired sooner, not from exhaustion alone, but from alignment. Bodies followed the sky. Eyes rested when darkness asked them to. Conversations grew quieter, sentences unfinished, not because they were unimportant, but because they could wait until morning. Bedrooms were simple: a bed, heavy blankets, maybe a chair. The lamp was turned low or extinguished entirely. Darkness did not feel empty, it felt complete. The mind wandered less when there was nothing demanding attention. Sleep arrived without struggle. It came as a continuation, not an escape. The day ended and rest followed, as predictable as sunrise would be later on. Dreams were shaped by real sounds, real silence, real fatigue. Somewhere, another lamp went dark, and the night, fully present now, held everything gently: fields, houses, thoughts, and the slow breathing of a world that had not yet learned how to stay awake forever. Just say continue when you want the story to flow on, seamless, calm, and unbroken.
The darkness did not press inward. It rested where it belonged. Without electric light spilling into the night, the world beyond the walls remained visible in its own quiet way. Stars appeared one by one, not all at once, but gradually, as though the sky itself needed time to remember them. Their light was faint, yet dependable, unchanged by human hands. People knew these stars. They did not name every one, but they felt their patterns. They could tell the hour by where the constellations leaned, how high the moon had climbed, how thick the darkness had grown between familiar shapes. Night was not confusing then, it was readable. Inside the house, the air carried the faint scent of oil and smoke, not unpleasant, just present. The lamp flickered slightly when someone shifted in their chair. That small movement of light was enough to remind everyone how fragile brightness was, how easily it could vanish if neglected. Care was part of living. Nothing ran endlessly without attention. Voices lowered naturally as the night deepened. Stories were told slowly, without performance, without urgency. These were not stories meant to impress. They were meant to accompany a moment, a memory of a long-ago winter, a neighbor's small misfortune, a quiet observation about the coming weather. Pauses were not awkward. Silence filled them gently. Outside, the road lay dark and empty. No headlights cut through it. No distant hum lingered on the horizon. Travel at night was rare and deliberate. Those who walked carried lanterns that swung softly, their light moving like a heartbeat along the ground. Each step was chosen. Each sound mattered. Animals settled into their own rhythms. Horses shifted in stalls, breathing deeply. Chickens slept without disturbance. Even wild creatures seemed closer somehow, their movements audible in the distance. Humans were not sealed away from the night. They were part of it, listening from within. In this world, time did not demand constant acknowledgement. There was no glowing clock to check, no screen pulling the eyes open again. People trusted the body's signals. When tiredness came, it was accepted. When wakefulness lingered, it was filled with thought, not distraction. The mind wandered differently without electric light. It moved inward. Thoughts were slower, heavier, but also clearer. There was nothing competing for attention, no sudden brightness, no endless stream of voices, just the quiet hum of awareness. Some nights, the wind carried distant sounds, water moving, leaves brushing together, the far-off creak of wood adjusting to the cold. These sounds were not labeled as noise. They were signs of continuity, proof that the world was still working while people rested. Candles burned lower as hours passed, their flames shortened, wax bending inward as if tired itself. Someone noticed and stood carefully, shielding the flame with a hand while adjusting the wick. Even this small act required patience. Rushing meant darkness. Bedrooms grew cooler as fires settled. Blankets were pulled higher, bodies curled slightly, conserving warmth. Sleep came in layers, not all at once. Light sleep first, then deeper, heavier rest. Waking briefly in the night was common, not alarming. People might sit up, listen, think, then lie back down when the moment passed. Dreams blended more easily with reality. The sounds outside seeped into them. A creak of a tree might become a door. The wind might become a voice. Waking from these dreams felt natural, not abrupt. There was no sudden glare to force the eyes open. Morning was expected, but not anticipated with impatience. Before electricity, dawn did not interrupt sleep. It invited waking. Light seeped into rooms slowly, pale and cool, touching the edges of furniture before reaching faces. Birds announced the change first, their calls layering one over another until the air itself felt awake.
People rose when the light felt right, not when an alarm insisted. The body adjusted, stretching into the new day. Fires were rebuilt. Lamps were left unlit. The night released its hold without resistance. This rhythm repeated itself day after day, season after season. It shaped how people thought, how they rested, how they related to time. Night was not something to conquer. It was a partner in living, offering rest in exchange for attention. And in that exchange, something rare existed, an agreement between the human body and the natural world, unbroken by wires or switches, held together only by darkness, patience, and the quiet understanding that sleep was not wasted time, but necessary time. The lamp, now cold and dark, waited silently for the next evening, when it would once again offer its small, faithful circle of light.
Beyond the house, the wider world rested in a state that modern nights rarely know. Villages were pockets of warmth surrounded by vast, unlit space. Between one home and the next, darkness was complete, uninterrupted by signage or passing beams. It was a darkness that asked for respect, not fear. People moved through it with familiarity, guided by memory, by sound, by the faint outline of land against sky. Those who needed to step outside did so with purpose. A lantern was lifted from its hook, glass already warm from earlier use. Its flame swayed gently as the door opened, briefly spilling light onto the ground before being swallowed again. The night did not resist. It accepted the intrusion and closed itself afterward. Paths were known by foot alone. Every dip, every route, every turn had been memorized over years of walking in all seasons. The body remembered where the eyes could not see. This kind of knowledge was quiet and deep, passed not through instruction, but through repetition. Inside, sleep continued in measured cycles. Without artificial light holding the mind at the surface, rest went deeper. Breathing slowed. Muscles loosened fully. The body trusted the dark because the dark had always kept its promises. Morning would come. It always did. There were moments in the night when someone woke fully, not from alarm, but from thought. Perhaps a worry drifted in, or a memory stirred. They lay still, listening. The house made small sounds as it cooled, wood adjusting, a beam releasing tension. These noises were not unsettling. They were reassuring, reminders that the structure was alive in its own way. In these moments, people thought more clearly. With nothing to look at, the mind arranged itself. Problems were turned over gently, without urgency. Many decisions were made in the dark, not written down, not spoken aloud, but settled internally, ready for daylight. Before electricity, imagination had space. Stories were not constant entertainment. They were occasional companions. When told, they lingered. A single tale might last weeks, revisited in fragments, shaped by memory rather than replayed exactly. This made them softer, more personal. No two tellings were ever the same. Children learned the night early. They learned which sounds mattered and which did not. The difference between wind and footsteps, between an animal moving and a branch falling. Fear was not amplified by mystery. It was tempered by understanding. Seasonal darkness changed everything. In winter, nights stretched long and heavy. Lamps burned more often. Fires were tended carefully. People slept longer, moved less, conserved energy without naming it as such. The body aligned with scarcity naturally. In summer, evenings lingered. Light faded slowly, generously. People stayed outside longer, talking quietly as the sky deepened from blue to indigo. When darkness finally arrived, it felt earned, like a closing chapter rather than an interruption. Electricity would later compress all of this. It would shorten nights artificially, flatten seasons, blur the boundary between rest and activity. But here, in this earlier world, boundaries were clear. Night was for slowing. Darkness was for stopping.
The absence of constant light changed how people valued it. A single candle could feel generous. A well-trimmed wick was a sign of care. Light was not assumed. It was created, maintained, and respected. Even illness behaved differently. When someone was sick, the night held them longer. Sleep was encouraged, not resisted. Care happened quietly. Cool cloths, whispered words, the steady presence of another body nearby. There was no harsh brightness to interrogate the body into wakefulness. When storms came, darkness deepened. Rain erased sound. Wind pressed against walls. Lamps were shielded carefully. People listened, counted seconds between thunder and lightning, gauged distance by instinct. Fear was present, but it was grounded in observation, not imagination fueled by excess stimulation. After the storm passed, the night felt clean. Air changed. Silence resumed with relief rather than tension. In this world, nights were not empty hours to be filled. They were a necessary counterpart to days. Without them, days would have meant nothing. Rest was not optional. It was built into life itself. As the years moved forward, these nights repeated themselves quietly, unnoticed by history books, unrecorded by timelines. Yet they shaped generations, how people rested, how they dreamed, how they understood their place in the world. And every evening, without fail, the same ritual returned. The sun lowered, shadows stretched, a match was struck, a small circle of light appeared. Then slowly, everything else faded. Just say next when you're ready, and the night will continue to unfold.
As years passed, these nights accumulated quietly, layering themselves into memory without being named. No one spoke of them as special. They were simply how life felt. The dark was not an event, it was the background against which everything else made sense. In towns slightly larger than villages, evenings followed the same pattern, only stretched by a few more voices and footsteps. Shops closed when daylight thinned. Doors were barred gently, not with urgency, but with habit. A final conversation might linger at a doorway, words trailing off as the sky deepened, both speakers aware that night was not the time for beginnings. Street lamps, if they existed at all, were few and dim. Often they were extinguished early to save fuel. Darkness reclaimed the road easily. The town did not vanish, it softened. Buildings became shapes, corners lost their edges. Familiar places relied less on sight and more on memory. People trusted memory then. Without constant visual stimulation, the mind built detailed internal maps. A person could walk a familiar route with little light and know exactly where they were. The body adjusted its stride before the brain consciously noticed. This quiet coordination between thought and movement was learned slowly, reinforced every night. Inside homes, night routines varied little. A final drink of water, a check on the fire, a look toward the window, not to see anything new, but to acknowledge the dark itself. In that look was acceptance, even gratitude. Darkness meant rest was allowed. Sleep did not always come easily, but it came honestly. When it delayed, there was no frustration directed at the clock, no calculation of lost hours. Wakefulness was treated as a temporary state, not a problem to be solved. People listened, breathed, waited. The absence of artificial light also changed how people aged. Eyes rested more fully. Minds were not pulled in too many directions at once. Elderly people sat comfortably with silence, their thoughts drifting without pressure. They had lived long enough to know that not every moment needed filling. Night work existed, but it was limited and deliberate. Bakers rose early, not because they enjoyed the dark, but because the town needed bread with the sunrise. Watchmen walked slowly, their lanterns marking time with each step. Their presence was reassuring, not imposing. They belonged to the night rather than fighting it.
In homes with infants, nights were fragmented but gentle. A baby's cry carried clearly through the stillness. Care was immediate, unhurried. No bright light flooded the room, just enough glow to guide hands and soothe, then darkness again, encouraging both child and parent back toward rest. Before electricity, the night taught patience. People learned to wait for light, for warmth, for morning. This waiting was not passive, it was attentive. It sharpened observation, softened expectation. Life unfolded at a pace that matched the body rather than challenging it. There were nights of celebration, too. Weddings, seasonal gatherings, shared meals that stretched past sunset. Even then, light was modest. Faces glowed warmly rather than brightly. Music carried farther in the dark, unchallenged by competing sounds. Laughter felt fuller, contained within the small illuminated space. When gatherings ended, darkness reclaimed everything without resentment. The night did not argue. It simply resumed its place. Over time, people developed a deep, almost unspoken trust in cycles, the certainty that after darkness came light, and after effort came rest. This trust anchored them through uncertainty. Even in hardship, night remained predictable. Electric light would one day fracture this trust, stretching days longer than they wished to be, blurring the line between work and rest. But here, in this earlier world, the line was firm and kind. Night was not something to endure, it was something to enter. As sleep deepened across houses and fields, the world seemed to breathe as one. Fires dimmed, lamps went cold, even thoughts slowed, drifting toward stillness. Dreams rose quietly, shaped by familiar sounds and remembered faces. Somewhere an owl called, once, then fell silent. Somewhere else, water moved steadily along its path, indifferent to darkness or light. The earth continued its work without needing to be seen. And within this vast, unlit space, people rested, not as an interruption to living, but as an essential part of it. The night held them gently, just as it always had, waiting patiently for the first thin line of dawn to appear at the edge of the world. The stillness deepened without announcing itself. It did not arrive as a change, but as a settling, like dust drifting back to the ground after being disturbed. The night was now fully present, thick but calm, wrapped around the land with a familiarity that asked nothing in return. In one house, a sleeper turned slightly, breath catching for a moment before easing again. The body adjusted on its own, finding comfort without waking the mind. Blankets shifted softly. Somewhere nearby, wood in the frame released a quiet sound, a reminder that even unmoving things were alive in small ways. The lamp on the table remained dark, its glass cool, its wick curled and spent. It would not be needed again until evening. There was no temptation to relight it, no reason to invite brightness back into the room. Darkness had already completed its work. Outside, the sky held steady. Stars no longer appeared, they simply were. Their light traveled an unimaginable distance to rest briefly on rooftops and fields, unnoticed by those sleeping beneath them. The moon, if present, offered only enough glow to soften the ground, never enough to disrupt rest. The road remained empty. No wheels passed over it. No voices echoed. It belonged entirely to the night now. Grass along its edges moved gently with the air, bending and lifting in slow rhythm. This movement had no audience. It did not require one. In nearby fields, animals slept in their own way. Some stood, some lay curled, some remained half aware, ears shifting at distant sounds. Their rest was practical, alert without tension. They trusted the night as they always had. Within the house, sleep drifted deeper, heavier, more complete. Thoughts loosened their grip and slipped away. Dreams formed without urgency. They did not race. They unfolded slowly, borrowing pieces of the day, reshaping them quietly. A memory of warmth, a familiar voice, a path walked many times. The absence of electric light allowed these dreams to stretch without interruption. Nothing pulled the mind abruptly back to the surface. No sudden glow demanded attention. The boundary between sleeping and waking remained soft, almost invisible. Time moved, but it did not insist on being noticed. Minutes passed as easily as breaths. Hours folded into one another without names. The night did not measure itself. In another house, a window stood slightly open. Cool air moved through it, carrying the faint scent of earth and leaves. Curtains stirred just enough to show that the world beyond still existed. The sleeper beneath did not wake. The body recognized the change and accepted it. This quiet exchange between indoors and outdoors was constant. Houses were not sealed. They breathed along with the night. Sounds traveled freely. Silence was shared. Farther away, a bell hung motionless, waiting for morning. Tools rested where they had been placed earlier, untouched. Clothing lay folded or draped without care. None of these objects mattered now. The night required nothing from them. Rest continued. The darkness did not feel endless. It felt sufficient. It held exactly as much time as was needed, no more, no less. There was no fear of missing anything, because nothing was happening that required witnessing. Eventually, almost imperceptibly, the quality of the dark began to change. Not brighter, not yet, just thinner, as though the night itself was loosening its grip, preparing to step aside without being asked. But for now, it remained, still, quiet, whole. And within it, the world slept, untouched by wires, untroubled by light, moving forward one breath at a time. The thinning of darkness did not hurry. It lingered at the edges, almost imperceptible, like a thought forming before it becomes clear. The night was still in control, but it was beginning to ease, not out of obligation, but out of rhythm. Inside the house, breathing remained slow and even. Sleep had reached its deepest lair, the kind that settles into the body rather than the mind. Muscles were heavy now, fully released. The heart kept a steady pace, unconcerned with time. This was the rest that could not be forced, only allowed. Outside, the air cooled slightly more, then stopped changing. The lowest temperature of the night arrived quietly and stayed. Dew formed where it wished, unnoticed, laying its fine trace across grass and wood and stone. Nothing resisted it. The stars held their positions. They did not fade yet. They waited. Somewhere far beyond the fields, water continued to move along its path. It slipped around bends, pressed against banks, carried small sounds through the stillness. These sounds traveled farther at night, unbroken by daytime activity, threading themselves gently into the dark. In a distant home, someone stirred, not fully awake, just aware enough to shift. A hand brushed the edge of the bed, fingers finding the familiar shape of wood. Comfort came not from sight, but from recognition. The hand rested again. Sleep reclaimed its place. Before electricity, these moments were common and unremarkable. Waking briefly in the night did not cause alarm. It did not trigger action. It was simply part of the larger movement of rest, like a pause in breathing before the next inhale. Thoughts, if they appeared, were slow and soft. They did not spiral. They did not demand solutions. They passed like clouds across a dark sky, noticed only faintly before dissolving. The night remained generous with silence. In the spaces between houses, the land held its shape without being seen. Fences traced lines through fields. Trees stood where they always had, branches resting, leaves unmoving. The dark did not erase them, it only asked them to wait. Waiting was not difficult then. The absence of electric light meant there was nothing to return to prematurely, no glowing room calling someone back from rest, no task half finished under artificial brightness. When night came, it closed the day completely. There was nothing left undone that could be fixed in the dark. This completeness allowed the mind to let go. As the hours continued, a subtle shift occurred, not in light, but in sound. The night insects softened their rhythm. Some fell silent altogether, others slowed as if listening. The balance of the dark adjusted itself again. Still, sleep held. The house remained still enough that its presence was barely felt. Walls did not separate as much as they sheltered. The roof did not isolate, it simply kept the sky at a respectful distance. Inside and outside existed in quiet agreement. Then, without ceremony, the earliest suggestion of morning approached. Not light yet, but the idea of it. The blackness of the sky lost its depth, becoming less absolute. Stars near the horizon dimmed first, not vanishing, but stepping back. The body sensed this before the mind did. Breathing changed slightly, not faster, just lighter. Sleep loosened its grip, preparing to release without resistance. Dreams thinned, their edges dissolving. Awareness hovered just beneath waking. Still no one rose. Morning was not something to rush toward. It would arrive when it was ready. In a nearby tree, a bird shifted position. Feathers rustled softly. The sound did not break the silence. It joined it. The bird did not sing yet. It waited, instinct guiding patience. The sky continued its slow transformation. Dark blue replaced black. Shapes in the landscape gained the faintest definition. Nothing was clear, but everything was present. Inside the house, eyes remained closed. The body knew the difference between light that demands and light that invites. This light did neither. It simply existed. Eventually, one breath deepened more than the others. A sleeper turned, not out of discomfort, but readiness. The night had done its work fully. Rest was complete. But waking did not happen all at once. For a while longer, the world hovered in between, neither night nor day, neither sleep nor action. This in-between space was familiar, welcomed, and unmeasured. Before electricity, this moment belonged to everyone. It was the quiet handover between dark and light, carried out without sound, without urgency, without interruption. And it passed gently, just as the night had.
The first sound of morning did not arrive as an announcement. It came softly, almost by accident, as a single note in the distance. One bird called, not loudly, not with confidence, but as if testing the air. The sound lingered for a moment, then faded, leaving the world unchanged yet subtly aware of what was coming. Inside the house, the light continued to grow without becoming bright. It slid across the floor, pale and cool, revealing the grain of wood, the edge of a table, the curve of a chair. Nothing startled, nothing demanded attention. The room revealed itself slowly, as though remembering its own shape. A sleeper's eyes opened, not wide, just enough to let in the morning. The ceiling came into focus, familiar and unremarkable. There was no sense of being pulled from rest. Sleep loosened its hold naturally, releasing the body one piece at a time.
Breathing deepened. A hand moved, stretching fingers that had been still for hours. The body listened inwardly, gauging readiness. There was no alarm to argue with, no schedule pressing from the dark. Rising was a choice guided by light and comfort rather than obligation. Outside, the sky shifted again. Blue grew stronger, pushing back what remained of night. Stars disappeared without ceremony. They were not mourned. They would return later, as they always did. The second bird joined the first, then another. Their calls did not overlap chaotically. Each waited instinctively, finding space between sounds. Morning built itself patiently, layer by layer. In the house, someone sat up slowly, allowing blood to move and settle. Feet touched the floor, cool and solid. The sensation grounded the body fully in the new day. For a moment there was stillness, not from fatigue, but from awareness. Before electricity, mornings were not filled with information. There were no headlines waiting, no messages demanding immediate response. The day began with presence alone. A door opened quietly. Outside air entered the room, carrying the scent of damp earth and leaves. Dew clung to everything it had touched. The world felt newly made, not because it was new, but because it had rested. Across the land, similar awakenings occurred. Not all at once, but in gentle sequence. One house stirred, then another. Fires were rebuilt carefully. Kindling caught slowly. Smoke rose in thin, pale lines before dissolving into the sky. People spoke little at first. Words were unnecessary. Movement was enough. A kettle was set. Water was poured. Simple tasks anchored the body to the day without overwhelming the mind. Animals responded to the light with their own routines. Horses shifted, eager but calm. Chickens began to move, sounds soft and rhythmic. Cows lowed quietly, not in urgency, just acknowledgement. The world did not feel rushed because nothing had been waiting overnight. Work would come, as it always did, but it would come in its time. There was no sense of being behind. Breakfast, when it happened, was modest. Food tasted sharper in the morning air. Each bite felt earned, not because of effort alone, but because rest had prepared the body to receive it. Outside, the land revealed itself fully now. Fields stretched clearly into the distance. Paths emerged from shadow. Trees regained their color, leaves catching light where dew had settled. The night was gone, but it did not feel lost. It had completed its purpose and stepped aside. There was no regret in its passing, no longing for it to return sooner. Its certainty was enough. Before electricity, this transition happened every day without fail. People did not marvel at it. They lived within it. Their bodies learned to trust it deeply, shaping energy, attention, and emotion around these reliable shifts. As the morning strengthened, sounds increased. Tools were lifted. Doors opened more fully. Voices grew clearer. Yet even now, there was no harshness. The day unfolded rather than exploded into being. The memory of night lingered in the body, not as sleepiness, but as steadiness. Rest had done its work quietly, leaving strength behind. And so the day began, not separate from the night that came before it, but as its natural continuation, each breath, each step, each moment guided by rhythms that required no wires, no switches, and no artificial light to exist. The day continued its slow awakening. Sounds layered themselves carefully, not all at once. The creak of a floorboard, soft and deliberate, marked a body moving from one corner to another. A kettle began to hum over a small fire, its voice steady and low, rising gradually into the room. Steam twisted in lazy spirals, catching the pale morning light, then fading into the air. Hands moved with purpose, but without hurry. Bread was sliced, butter spread in measured strokes, water poured into waiting cups. Each motion contained weight and intention. No one rushed because there was no outside urgency pressing in. The day had arrived on its own terms, and life adjusted accordingly. Outside, animals stretched into motion. Chickens fluffed their feathers, scratching gently at the soil, their small sounds punctuating the soft murmur of the morning. Horses stamped lightly, settling into rhythm with their own bodies and the land beneath them. A dog barked once, a short, deliberate sound, then paused, listening to the quieter hum of distant fields and flowing water. The wind began to move more insistently, brushing against trees and carrying the smell of damp earth. Leaves rustled in subtle chorus, a sound that required no attention, yet filled space in a comforting way. The world was alive, but not urgent. Each element, air, water, living creature, acted in harmony with the slow unfolding of the sun. People stepped outside in turn, feet pressed into dew-soaked earth, careful but unhurried. A basket was lifted, a tool adjusted. The act of being outdoors required awareness, and attention was given freely, without distraction. Hands felt the texture of wood, the pull of rope, the weight of matter, connecting the human to the tangible in ways impossible in a world dominated by flickering light and screens. Voices began to rise, low and cautious. Greetings were soft, not because there was fear, but because they belonged to this measured morning. Names were spoken slowly, words chosen with care, conversation emerging in rhythm with movement rather than forcing it. The air seemed to demand this patience, rewarding those who matched its pace. Within homes, fires burned steadily. Smoke curled upward, caught on beams, and then released itself into the wider air. No one worried about sparks flying, because the entire environment had been learned through experience. Observation replaced caution. Skill replaced fear. The day, like the night, required respect, and respect was given naturally. Children moved between spaces with deliberate curiosity. They did not run because there was no call for haste. Their eyes observed patterns of light and shadow, shapes of furniture, contours of pathways outside. They learned from touch, from sound, from small corrections whispered by adults. Their understanding of space, rhythm, and time grew quietly, without pressure, without instruction beyond example. Labor began, but it was measured. Tasks were divided by need and capability, not by clock. A man tended to the field, his movements precise and careful. Another repaired a fence, tools moving in coordinated arcs. Work was rhythmic, harmonious with the day. No one pushed themselves beyond necessity. There was no expectation of speed imposed from outside. Conversations during labor were gentle, punctuated by silence. Words carried information, occasionally a quiet joke or an observation about weather or the progress of the morning. There were no interruptions by distant noise, no competing signals demanding attention. Every sound was intentional, every silence considered. Meals were prepared slowly, food cooked over coals, stirring, watching, smelling. The aroma spread through the house and into the yard, blending with the scent of dew and wood smoke. Each bite eaten was intentional. Each sip of water drawn into the body was felt fully. The day moved in a cadence set by need, by instinct, by the gentle insistence of natural cycles. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to touch rooftops fully. Shadows shortened, light grew warmer, colors sharpened into clarity.
People adjusted their work accordingly. There was no rush to finish. The day simply progressed, revealing itself through repetition, observation, and patient attention. The simplicity of this routine created space for thought, for reflection, for planning. Ideas were nurtured slowly, developing like seedlings in well-tended soil. Without the constant pull of artificial stimulation, the mind could focus, expand, and rest in turns. And through it all, the memory of night lingered. The body remembered its deep rest, the gradual release from darkness, the slow unfolding into awareness. Even as hands worked, even as voices rose, even as animals stirred, this quiet imprint remained. It anchored the day in a rhythm that was both natural and enduring, shaping every movement, every breath, every thought. No clock measured this time. No screen demanded attention. The day simply existed, as complete and deliberate as the night that preceded it, as soft and inevitable as the light that now bathed the land.
By late morning, the light had grown stronger, but it was still soft enough to reveal details gradually rather than all at once. Every surface in the house seemed to breathe with the day. Wood grain catching the pale sun, walls glowing faintly in the corners, the floors reflecting a quiet warmth. Movements were measured, deliberate, in harmony with this unfolding clarity. Outside, the air carried subtle changes. The breeze shifted through fields, brushing the tops of grass and wildflowers, bending them just enough to create a soft ripple. Trees swayed gently, their leaves whispering against each other. The sounds were constant, yet unobtrusive, part of the ongoing rhythm rather than a call to action. People moved through the yard and nearby paths with calm assurance. Each footfall was deliberate, measured against the texture of the ground beneath. Soft soil gave slightly, gravel crunched faintly under shoes, and every step reinforced a sense of presence and understanding. No one hurried because the day had no pressing demands beyond what it naturally required. Tools were lifted and handled with care, a plow adjusted by hand, soil shifting under steady pressure. A scythe glinted faintly in the sunlight as it traced arcs across the field, cutting methodically, rhythmically. Each swing was purposeful, but not rushed, each stroke measured and aware of the surrounding space. Children wandered nearby, absorbing the lessons of labor in silence. Hands brushed against rough textures, fingers curling around handles, shapes learned more through touch than sight. They observed the movements of adults, copying gently, practicing small tasks under careful supervision. Every motion became a small exercise in patience, skill, and attention to detail. Voices rose slowly, joining the murmur of activity. Conversations were quiet, deliberate, interspersed with silence. Observations about the weather, the soil, the progress of the field were spoken softly, never competing for attention. Humor appeared occasionally, light and unobtrusive, punctuating work without disrupting the overall calm. Inside the house, meals were prepared with steady rhythm. Dough kneaded by hand, water measured carefully, fire tended with attentive eyes. The aroma of baking bread mingled with smoke from the stove, and the scent of fresh herbs hung faintly in the air. Each task was both necessary and comforting, forming a cadence that defined the flow of the morning. Animals participated in their own quiet way. Chickens scratched along paths, pecking in measured sequences, aware of their own space and that of others. Horses moved steadily, their hooves on the soft ground producing a rhythmic sound that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. Cows lowed softly, grazing calmly, their movements deliberate and unhurried.
Every living creature adhered to its own pace, in balance with the day. By mid-morning, sunlight had risen high enough to bring sharper clarity to everything. Shadows shortened, but they remained soft, edges undefined and gentle. Surfaces previously indistinct now revealed themselves fully, wood and stone, grass and soil, all touched by quiet illumination. Movements continued at the same steady pace, guided by observation, habit, and instinct rather than external pressure. Evenings were distant in thought, but the memory of the night lingered. The body remembered its deep rest, the gradual emergence into morning, and the patience required to move through darkness before light. This awareness shaped every motion, every breath, every glance. Time was measured naturally by cycles and sensations rather than clocks or schedules. Conversations during this stretch of the day were slow, deliberate, often unfinished, not from neglect, but because silence was valued as much as speech. Pauses were welcomed, offering room for reflection, observation, or simply listening to the world around. Words were tools, not noise. Small household chores continued in rhythm with the day. Linen was folded, dishes washed, small repairs attended to with patient hands. Each action required focus, yet none felt urgent. The presence of light allowed clarity, but it did not demand speed. The pace of life remained in alignment with natural rhythms, uninterrupted by artificial interference. Water from nearby wells or streams was drawn carefully. Buckets were lifted and poured with attention, each movement performed in quiet coordination with gravity and the weight of the vessel. The sound of liquid striking the container or the stone basin was soft but consistent, adding another layer to the day's gentle soundtrack. By late morning, the entire household and surrounding property existed in a state of calm productivity. Every task, every movement, every sound was deliberate, part of the larger pattern of life that had existed long before electric illumination would one day alter it. There was purpose in every gesture, yet no one felt rushed. The day was measured not by hours, but by the completion of natural cycles and attentiveness to the immediate environment. Birds continued their soft chorus. Occasionally, a note rose above the others, then settled back into the sequence of sound, weaving naturally into the overall quiet rhythm. The wind shifted subtly, brushing leaves, bending stalks of grain, stirring distant grass. All movement was gentle, reinforcing the sense of steady passage rather than abrupt change. Inside, the household progressed seamlessly. Meals prepared, chores completed, tasks anticipated and executed without urgency. The interior spaces reflected the light gradually, revealing textures, corners, and familiar shapes without startling anyone. Surfaces were touched, examined, remembered. Every action reinforced awareness and attention to the present. And throughout it all, the body remained aligned with these rhythms. Breathing matched movement, eyes observed slowly, hands acted with deliberate patience. The mind wandered comfortably, never racing, never distracted by demands from beyond this immediate world. Time continued without intervention. The day unfolded naturally, shaped entirely by the cycles of light, rest, and human activity. Nothing pressed forward artificially, nothing intruded unnecessarily. Every breath, every motion, every sound was part of the seamless flow of life as it had existed long before electric illumination would one day alter it.
Afternoon arrived with a quiet inevitability. The sun climbed higher, warming roofs, fields, and the surfaces of the yard with gentle insistence. Light shifted subtly across the landscape, illuminating familiar shapes while leaving shadows softly defined.
Every object, every edge seemed to breathe in response to the sun, slowly coming into focus without abruptness. People moved deliberately. Hands adjusted tools, lifted baskets, guided implements across soil or wood. Each motion was precise, aware of weight and balance. There was no hurry, no external insistence demanding speed. The rhythm of labor matched the rhythm of the day, steady, predictable, and satisfying. Children wandered through the yard, absorbing the lessons of movement and observation. They stepped carefully over uneven ground, adjusted their posture when lifting, and watched adults with quiet attention. Their eyes cataloged shapes and distances. Their hands learned pressure and texture. Every motion was a small study in patience and skill. Animals followed their own natural rhythms. Chickens pecked rhythmically at the soil, clucking softly to one another. Horses shifted their weight from one hoof to another, ears flicking at the faintest noises, their movements measured and economical. Cows moved slowly across pastures, chewing steadily, each step precise and deliberate. Even the dog seemed to pace itself with the natural tempo of the day, its senses tuned to every small shift in sound and smell. Voices rose and fell gently. Words were exchanged thoughtfully, often in brief sentences, sometimes punctuated by silent observation. Humor appeared occasionally, small and understated, blending into the atmosphere of quiet labor. No voice dominated, no sound felt intrusive. Conversations existed as part of the larger cadence of the day. Inside homes, cooking and cleaning continued with careful attention. Meals were prepared over low fires, stirred slowly and tended attentively. The aroma of cooking spread without force, mingling naturally with the faint scent of smoke, the warmth of sunlight streaming through windows, and the freshness of morning dew clinging to the grass outside. Every action was deliberate, grounded in practicality and attentiveness rather than urgency. Water drawn from wells or streams was handled with care. Buckets were lifted slowly, poured with precision, the gentle plunk of liquid joining the soft chorus of day. Every sound seemed intentional, contributing to the overall sense of quiet order. Even when chores repeated themselves, each repetition was mindful, observed, and appreciated. The passing hours were unmeasured, known only by subtle changes in light and temperature. Shadows shifted slowly, lengthening in one direction, then softening as the sun traced its arc. The wind whispered through trees and tall grass, rustling leaves in a sound both continuous and unpredictable, blending seamlessly with the hum of distant activity. People paused naturally throughout the day. A hand rested on a table, a shoulder leaned briefly against a wall. The body recognized its own need for micro-rests, and these pauses were accepted without guilt. They were part of the rhythm, as necessary as food, water, or work. Meals were simple yet nourishing. Bread, cheese, fresh vegetables, and occasional meat, prepared over slow fires, provided sustenance. Each bite was intentional, eaten slowly to allow flavor and texture to be fully experienced. The act of eating became a continuation of the day's measured tempo, grounding the body further into awareness of itself and the surrounding environment. Outside, insects added their own subtle layer to the day's soundscape. Their chirps and hums shifted with temperature and light, never harsh or overwhelming. Every movement of the air seemed mirrored in their flight, their buzzing a gentle accompaniment to human and animal activity. By mid-afternoon, the heat softened slightly. Work continued, but with more awareness of the passing sun. People adjusted clothing, wiped sweat, and shifted positions to remain comfortable. There was no rush to finish, only attention to what needed to be done. Every gesture remained deliberate, steady, and complete. Even as labor persisted, there was room for reflection. Minds wandered quietly, following thoughts as they arose, never pressured by external intrusion. Observations were made of the environment, shapes of clouds, angles of light, sounds carried on the wind. Without artificial interruptions, the mind could fully inhabit these details, noticing patterns that might otherwise go unseen. Birds continued their slow chorus, occasionally dipping down to forage, then rising again, their wings silent against the calm air. Their movements were measured, each action a study in efficiency and attention. The rhythm of life in the natural world mirrored the careful pace of human activity. As afternoon deepened, shadows lengthened once more, stretching toward the east. Light warmed yet softened simultaneously, touching every surface gently, revealing textures that had been hidden in brighter or harsher illumination. Every object, every person seemed part of the larger composition, moving and existing in balance. In homes, work continued without urgency. Laundry was folded carefully, utensils cleaned, repairs attended to. Even repeated tasks were done mindfully, as if each movement had significance beyond the act itself. Silence punctuated these motions naturally, allowing space for thought, reflection, and observation. Children occasionally paused, observing birds or insects, feeling textures beneath their fingers, noticing the interplay of light and shadow on familiar surfaces. They learned not from instruction alone, but from immersive participation in this deliberate, patient world. By late afternoon, the day approached a turning point. Light began to shift again, softer now, warming in hue as the sun lowered toward the horizon. The wind moved differently, cooler against skin, carrying the scent of soil and grass freshly warmed by the sun. Every movement, every breath, every sound adjusted naturally to the changing quality of the day. And still, the pace remained unhurried. No rush, no intrusion, no sudden demands. The day unfolded as it always had, slowly, deliberately, each moment a continuation of the one before, seamlessly merging into the next, guided entirely by rhythm, observation, and presence.
The afternoon shifted imperceptibly toward evening. The sun's warmth softened, spreading golden light across rooftops and fields, painting everything with long, gentle shadows. Surfaces glowed subtly, edges of objects catching the last angles of sun before they would darken. The air cooled gradually, carrying the faint scent of soil and leaves, of wood smoke from fires that had burned steadily through the day. People continued their work, but the rhythm had changed. Movements slowed naturally, less forceful, more deliberate. Hands that had labored in full sun now adjusted with care, mindful of the softer light. Each step, each gesture aligned itself with the subtle cues of approaching night. Tasks were completed in stages, without urgency, every motion observed and attended to. Children's play quieted. They wandered among gardens or along paths with softer steps, observing the lengthening shadows and the slow swaying of trees. Their laughter was subdued, a gentle accompaniment to the calm evening. Eyes followed insects returning to their resting places, birds preparing to roost, small mammals scurrying quietly among underbrush. Nature moved in anticipation of darkness, and humans adjusted instinctively. Animals mirrored this shift. Chickens returned to their coops, flapping wings softly, settling into their nests. Horses stretched slowly before lowering heads to rest, their hooves making careful contact with the soft earth. Cows gathered in shaded areas, chewing steadily, readying themselves for the cooler hours ahead. Even the household dog paced less and paused more,
aware of the subtle change in light, scent, and sound. Voices dropped lower. Speech continued, but it carried a gentle tone, not demanding attention, blending into the subtle murmur of activity. People spoke softly about the work completed, the next day's needs, or small observations of the shifting sky. Silence punctuated these exchanges naturally, creating a rhythm that mirrored the waning day. Inside homes, meals were prepared for evening. Fires were tended carefully, embers coaxed to steady flames. Bread and porridge, vegetables, and small portions of meat simmered slowly, their aromas mingling with the warm scent of dusted floors and cooling walls. Eating was deliberate, mindful, a continuation of the day's measured pace rather than a task to hurry through. Water was drawn from wells or stored cisterns with careful attention. Buckets were lifted, poured, and returned to rest. The sound of liquid striking containers added to the layering of the evening's subtle soundtrack. Every action, even the most routine, became part of the careful orchestration of human presence within a slowly darkening world. The sun lowered further, the sky deepening to hues of rose and violet. Shadows stretched longer, softening edges, blending ground and wall, object and air. Every movement now took place in this gentle half-light, teaching the body to observe more attentively, rely on memory and familiarity, and move with deliberate care. As night approached, windows were opened or closed to regulate air, curtains adjusted to shield against the evening chill or allow fading light. Candles were prepared for the hours ahead, wicks trimmed carefully, lamps checked. The act of providing light was not hurried. It required mindfulness and patience, an acknowledgement of darkness rather than a conquest over it. Animals prepared for night naturally. Chickens huddled together, horses shifted to stable positions, dogs lay curled in quiet corners, alert but relaxed. Their bodies responded to cues the eye could barely register, the drop in temperature, the shift in light, the subtle change in wind. Humans observed these rhythms, learned from them, and adjusted their own movements accordingly. Evening chores continued, but with gentler intent. Laundry completed, tools put in order, floors swept and dusted. Each task was finished with care, a closing ritual rather than a rush to completion. Movements were deliberate, sound was muted, and minds were present. Every action connected the person to their environment, reinforcing awareness, patience, and attentiveness. Conversations became even softer. Families gathered to share observations of the day or quiet thoughts about tomorrow. Words were chosen deliberately, silences held respectfully. Laughter appeared occasionally, subdued, brief, yet warm, blending into the general rhythm of the evening. The first stars appeared in the sky, faint and patient. They did not demand notice. They existed quietly, gradually revealing themselves as the light faded. People looked, sometimes for a moment, sometimes longer, noting patterns, imagining shapes, or simply enjoying the constancy of the night. Inside, fires dimmed, lamps flickered to life. Their glow was small, but enough to create safe circles of light. Shadows danced gently on walls, reinforcing the sense of comfort, of enclosure, of space carefully tended. The light did not overwhelm, it accompanied the dark, coexisting with it. The pace of movement slowed further. Hands rested, bodies leaned, feet touched familiar surfaces with awareness. Even breathing adjusted, matching the quiet tempo of the emerging night. The day's work had been completed, and now the body allowed itself to transition into rest. Dinner concluded, dishes cleaned, fires tended one last time. Silence expanded in the rooms, punctuated only by small household sounds, the settling of wood, the faint movement of animals, the occasional whisper of conversation. Outside, crickets began their soft rhythm. Wind brushed lightly through leaves, and distant water moved quietly, uninterrupted. Sleep approached naturally. People moved toward bed slowly, carefully, aware of the gradual shift from activity to rest. Blankets were drawn up, heads positioned, bodies allowed to release tension. The light from lamps provided gentle reassurance, then dimmed as attention shifted inward. Outside, darkness deepened fully. Stars multiplied across the sky, cool and distant. The moon, if visible, cast pale light on familiar paths, trees, and rooftops. Shadows softened into gentle forms. The night carried its usual assurance. It had always returned, and it would always pass. Breathing slowed, muscles relaxed completely. Minds settled into a quiet hum of awareness before giving way fully to sleep. The rhythm of the world, so carefully observed throughout the day, continued seamlessly, unbroken, unhurried.
The night deepened without fanfare. Darkness settled over the fields and homes, thick yet soft, holding everything in a quiet embrace. The circles of lamp and firelight inside houses glowed faintly, not to chase away shadows, but to mark safe space, leaving the rest of the room surrendered to gentle blackness. Every corner, every wall seemed to breathe alongside the occupants, alive yet unobtrusive. Within one house, the faint crackle of a dying fire offered warmth and soft sound. Its glow illuminated familiar objects, a bowl resting on a shelf, a wooden chair, the curve of a table edge, without revealing more than necessary. A sleeper shifted slightly beneath blankets, muscles relaxing further into the soft weight of rest. Breathing was slow, even, carrying the body gently through the deepest part of night. Outside, the air carried the faint scent of earth and grass. Dew clung to leaves and soil, reflecting starlight in tiny points, glimmering like scattered gems. Trees swayed faintly with the breeze, their rustling subtle, soothing, an accompaniment to human rest. Animals moved carefully, almost silently, adapting to darkness. Chickens rested in their coops, bodies pressed together for warmth, small clucks punctuating the stillness. Horses shifted on soft hooves, lowering heads in measured motion. Dogs curled tightly, ears twitching at faint sounds, alert but calm. Crickets began their slow, precise chorus, each note deliberate, each pause intentional. Somewhere distant, water continued its endless path, slipping over rocks, around bends, murmuring softly as it traveled. Every sound seemed smaller in the quiet, yet larger in presence, forming a delicate orchestra that required no attention to exist fully. Inside homes, lamps were extinguished, leaving only the faintest glow of embers in hearths. Silence expanded to fill the space, steady and encompassing. Any movement within these walls was careful, deliberate. A hand reached for a blanket, repositioned a pillow, adjusted a sleeping child. The motions were familiar, performed by memory as much as by sight, graceful in their simplicity. The night encouraged observation. Even in sleep, senses were attuned. The faint sound of wind through the eaves, the soft creak of wood, the distant murmur of field animals, all registered quietly, becoming part of the subconscious rhythm. Dreams began to form in this fertile space, slow, gentle, shaped by memory, sensation, and instinct rather than urgency. Time moved differently in these hours. Without artificial light or imposed schedules, the night stretched without being measured. Minutes and hours blended, carried along by the natural cadence of life. Bodies relaxed fully, minds meandered, and the world maintained its delicate balance between motion and stillness. Occasionally, a sleeper shifted, a knee bent, a hand moved, a breath adjusted. The motion was soft, careful, without urgency. Each movement was absorbed by the room, unnoticed by others, but significant in maintaining the seamless flow of rest.
Outside, the wind shifted subtly, brushing grasses and leaves. Shadows danced faintly in the moonlight, elongated and soft. Birds that had slept now began faint rustlings, repositioning within trees before dawn. Creatures of the night, small mammals, nocturnal insects, continued their careful navigation of field and underbrush, aware of the quiet world surrounding them. Inside, the household lay in layered rest. A parent reached quietly for a child who had stirred, smoothing blankets, adjusting position, returning warmth and security without sound. Even the faintest motion maintained continuity with the rhythm of the night. Every gesture was mindful, deliberate, anchored in awareness rather than urgency. Time continued its subtle passage. The night deepened further, then softened slightly, as though preparing the world for the eventual return of light. The first faint shifts of sky near the horizon hinted at what would come, though not yet enough to rouse the sleepers. Darkness remained dominant, yet it carried a quiet promise embedded in its rhythm. Breathing across the house, across the fields, across the sleeping landscape became one with the night. Every inhalation and exhalation echoed the calm, measured pulse of the world. Shadows deepened in corners, softened across walls, traced patterns only noticeable when the mind wandered slowly enough to notice them. Sleep remained deep, unbroken, patient. Thoughts, sensations, and subconscious awareness all coexisted, moving through a gentle continuum of rest. The body absorbed all of the night's quiet, storing warmth, preparing strength, anticipating the slow unfolding of the coming day. And as the night carried onward, fully present and undisturbed, every creature, human, animal, or otherwise, moved through its own cycles, each in silent coordination with the natural world, each in rhythm with the seamless, enduring cadence of life before electricity. The deepest hours of night lingered in a quiet, unbroken continuum. Darkness was complete, yet soft, like a thick cloth draped carefully over the world. Shadows had no edges, forms blended seamlessly into one another, and the air was cool, carrying faint scents of earth, dew, and wood smoke lingering from evening fires. The night was both still and alive, steady and aware. Inside homes, the body of the household rested fully. Sleep had deepened to a weightless rhythm, where muscles released tension entirely, and breath moved with deliberate ease. Blankets rose and fell gently with the chest and abdomen, the body adjusting subtly to shifts in temperature or position. Movements were slow, purposeful, instinctual, too subtle to disturb anyone else, yet essential to maintaining comfort. Fires in hearths had long reduced to embers. Their glow still clung faintly to stones and iron, a dim companion to the darkness. Lamps were extinguished, leaving rooms bathed in soft shadows. Familiar objects became silhouettes, outlines recognized by memory rather than sight. Every corner, every surface existed in intimate proximity, quietly acknowledged without attention. Outside, the air stirred softly. Leaves rustled in subtle waves. Grasses bent lightly under gentle wind. The faint scurrying of nocturnal creatures, mice, small birds, insects, added another layer of sound to the night, delicate and unobtrusive. Even the distant movement of water in streams or irrigation ditches contributed, its gentle murmur blending seamlessly with the larger orchestra of rest. Animals continued their own nocturnal rhythms. Chickens rested quietly in coops, occasionally shifting to settle more comfortably, clucks barely audible. Horses stretched, then lowered their heads, hooves pressing softly into the ground. Dogs curled in corners or near doorways, ears flicking to detect faint sounds, body fully relaxed but alert. The land itself felt alive with movement that demanded no intervention, no awareness, yet existed in perfect alignment with the rhythm of darkness. Dreams unfolded within the human mind slowly, deliberately, not rushed, not urgent. They drifted in seamless narratives shaped by memory, imagination, and subtle impressions from the day. Faces of family members, landscapes walked earlier, sounds remembered, all interwove into delicate tapestries of sleep. Consciousness hovered just below awareness, attentive yet unpressured, observing and experiencing without urgency. Time existed but was unmeasured. The night carried a sense of permanence and patience, a continuum where minutes and hours blended imperceptibly. There was no need for clocks, no need for light, no need for interruption. Sleep governed itself naturally, punctuated only by instinctive shifts, a knee bent, an arm repositioned, a foot adjusted. Every movement reinforced the intimate connection between body and environment. The first hints of pre-dawn were imperceptible at first, a shift in the air's chill, a faint change in the quality of darkness near the horizon. The stars remained dominant, yet they seemed sharper in contrast to the faint glow emerging in the east. It was subtle, almost secretive, a gentle reminder that night was nearing its natural conclusion. Inside homes, the body of the household remained still, yet every corner held subtle energy, a readiness for what was to come. Doors shifted slightly as small animals, humans, or wind caused minute movement. Everything, though quiet, was alive in a careful, deliberate cadence. The first rays of sun crept above the horizon, delicate and pale. Light touched treetops, kissed fields, brushed rooftops. Shadows retreated slowly, lengthening in some areas while softening in others. The air carried the warmth of promise, signaling the transition from complete rest to the gentle energy of day. People stirred more noticeably now. Eyes opened slowly, muscles stretched deliberately. A hand brushed against a blanket, repositioned a pillow, settled a child. Bodies emerged from deep sleep with careful awareness, guided by the soft, insistent arrival of light rather than urgency or alarm. Outside, animals adapted instantly. Chickens lifted heads, began clucking softly. Horses shifted, stretching legs, adjusting positions to absorb morning warmth. Dogs yawned, stretched, then paused to sniff the cool air. The land itself felt alive with movement that demanded no intervention, no awareness, yet existed in perfect alignment with the rhythm of living. Breath synchronized with movement. Thoughts emerged gradually, unhurried, weaving memories of night into anticipations for the day. Conversations began quietly, exchanges of soft words, measured questions, gentle laughter. There was no rush, only presence. Dew glistened in faint patches, reflecting the first sun rays. Paths appeared clearer. Textures of stone, wood, and soil revealed themselves gradually. The day unfolded seamlessly from night, guided entirely by the natural cadence of light, air, and life. And in this slow emergence, life continued, human and animal, motion and stillness, sound and silence, all in a measured, unhurried dance that had existed long before electricity would one day alter the way people experienced the passage of time.
Morning unfolded fully, but with no sudden arrival, just a gentle assertion of light across the land. Rays stretched across rooftops, touching walls, floors, and familiar objects with a soft, golden clarity. Shadows receded gradually, edges soft and undefined, as though the world itself were taking a deep, deliberate breath. Inside homes, people stirred in measured sequences. Eyes opened slowly, hands adjusted blankets, muscles stretched with conscious attention. Each movement was deliberate, mindful of the body's needs, aligned with the gradual shift in light. No one rushed. There was no artificial insistence to move faster than nature allowed. the transition from night to day was seamless, intimate, and complete. Animals responded instinctively. Chickens clucked softly, scratching at the ground in orderly, repetitive motions. Horses shifted, stretched, and moved with careful precision, balancing hooves and body weight. Cows grazed quietly, their chewing rhythmic and steady. Even dogs moved cautiously, sniffing the air, alert to subtle changes, yet calm in the absence of urgency. Outside, the air carried the scent of earth, dew, and warming soil. Wind shifted lightly through leaves, rustling softly, a delicate accompaniment to the growing light. Birds began their calls, quiet at first, then more confident as the sun climbed higher. Their voices layered slowly, harmonizing with the gentle, continuous hum of nature in motion. Within homes, fires were rekindled with deliberate care. Embers were coaxed into flame, kindling added gradually. Water was drawn from wells, poured into kettles, and set to boil. Breakfast was prepared thoughtfully, bread sliced, porridge stirred, herbs and vegetables measured with attention. Every gesture required patience, skill, and focus, reinforcing the intimacy between human, task, and environment. Children moved through these routines with deliberate curiosity. Hands brushed against textures, wood, cloth, stone, familiar yet full of information. Eyes traced shadows, angles of sunlight, details of furniture and tools. Movements were careful, deliberate, learning through touch, observation, and repetition. Every action was a small study in patience, awareness, and understanding. Voices remained calm, soft, deliberate. Exchanges carried necessary information, observations about the day, or gentle humor. Conversations coexisted with silence naturally. Pauses were as meaningful as speech. No sound dominated. All were part of the flowing rhythm of morning life. Work commenced in the fields with slow precision. Hands adjusted grips on tools, measured effort with care, and moved in coordination with the land. Plowing, digging, weeding, each task was executed methodically. No hurry existed. Labor aligned itself with the body's rhythms and the gradual progress of daylight. Every gesture reinforced presence, attention, and skill. Water, drawn from streams or cisterns, flowed carefully into containers. The soft plunk of liquid hitting wood or stone added another layer to the subtle morning orchestra. Each sound was precise, part of the larger harmony of daily life. Even repetition held significance. Motion was deliberate awareness interwoven with action. Sunlight warmed surfaces gradually. Floors, furniture, and tools all absorbed the light, reflecting it subtly. Shadows shifted, lengthened, and softened again. The air carried warmth, hinting at the full energy of the day yet to come. People adjusted clothing, moved slowly to accommodate temperature changes, maintaining comfort without hurry. Meals continued, small and nourishing. Bread, butter, vegetables, perhaps a small portion of meat, prepared and eaten deliberately. Every bite was measured, every sip intentional. Food became part of the continuum, reinforcing awareness, grounding the body in the measured passage of morning. Outside, nature continued its careful choreography. Insects buzzed faintly, flitting from plant to plant. Birds flitted between branches, soft calls marking movement. Grass bent lightly under the breeze. Trees swayed subtly, their leaves whispering together. Everything operated in alignment with the gentle passage of sunlight and time. As mid-morning approached, movement and attention harmonized. Labor continued in fields and workshops.
Homes remained orderly and routines unfolded naturally. Even repetitive tasks retained quiet significance, embedding lessons in observation, patience, and skill. The land itself seemed aware of the unfolding day. Shadows shifted predictably. Temperature, light, and sound blended in a subtle choreography. Humans and animals alike moved within these cues, their behavior synchronized instinctively, guided by observation rather than clocks or artificial signals. By late morning, the rhythm of life was fully established. Conversations continued in soft tones. Work proceeded methodically, with pauses for observation and reflection. Children learned attentively. Meals reinforced presence. Animals adjusted their behavior. The world operated in a delicate balance, each element contributing to the seamless unfolding of life long before electricity. Even in motion, every step, gesture, and sound held quiet intention. No moment felt wasted. Every breath, every glance, every motion connected the individual to the environment, the body to the land, the day to the night that had passed. The world existed fully, wholly, uninterrupted, carrying a continuity of experience unbroken by artificial forces. The day continued, unhurried, steady, complete in itself. The rhythms of light, rest, labor, and observation guided existence entirely. Life moved with awareness, intention, and care, each moment an unspoken harmony of presence, patience, and connection.
The afternoon settled over the land with a slow, deliberate patience. Sunlight, now higher, touched every surface with a golden softness, illuminating rooftops, fields, and paths without glare or haste. Shadows shifted gently, stretching across the ground and retreating with subtle grace, marking the day's passage without insistence. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every stone absorbed and reflected light in quiet acknowledgement. People moved with steady awareness. Hands adjusted, lifted, and carried tools, baskets, or materials with care. Each motion was deliberate, grounded in both necessity and presence. There was no rush, no external demand, only the steady progression of work in harmony with the land and the rhythm of the day. Children wandered nearby, stepping carefully over uneven paths, observing motions of adults, imitating gently. Their curiosity was measured, deliberate, practiced in subtle movements and observations. Each small gesture, touching soil, feeling textures of wood or stone, tracing shapes with fingertips, was a lesson in patience and understanding. Animals adapted seamlessly to the afternoon's energy. Chickens scratched the earth in orderly motions, soft clucks punctuating the air. Horses shifted, lowered heads, and stretched limbs carefully. Cows grazed methodically, chewing steadily, each motion precise and measured. Even dogs moved quietly, alert but relaxed, attuned to sounds too faint to demand attention but too important to ignore. The air carried warmth, mixed with the faint scent of earth, smoke, and vegetation. Leaves whispered with the wind, rustling in harmony with distant water, soft clucking, and low animal movements. The world's soundscape was rich, yet unobtrusive, a subtle symphony that required no attention to exist fully. Inside homes, fires burned steadily, kitchens filled with the gentle aroma of cooking. Bread rose slowly in warmth, porridge stirred quietly, vegetables prepared with attentive hands. Every action was intentional, a meditation on sustenance and care rather than haste. Water from wells flowed steadily into kettles and basins, each pour punctuating the rhythm of movement with deliberate sound. Voices were calm, soft, and purposeful.
Exchanges were brief and measured, sometimes punctuated with gentle humor, blending seamlessly into the surrounding calm. Pauses were natural, filled with observation, reflection, or the quiet hum of the afternoon. Words existed as part of the day's measured tempo, never urgent, never intrusive. Fieldwork continued methodically. Tools traced arcs through soil with steady precision, hands and arms moving in rhythm with the body and land. Weeds were pulled, soil turned, and seeds planted with deliberate attention. Each action was complete before the next, movements mindful, unhurried, embedded in observation and respect for the land. Watering or drawing from streams remained measured. Buckets were lifted carefully, poured with attention, returned with gentle care. The sound of liquid striking vessels added to the quiet symphony, reinforcing presence in every motion. Repetition was neither boring nor rushed. It was a rhythm that anchored the mind and body in the ongoing flow of life. Light shifted subtly as the sun traced its course. Shadows lengthened gradually, softening surfaces and highlighting textures previously unnoticed. Wood grain, stone, soil, and plant surfaces revealed themselves incrementally, inviting careful observation and mindful interaction. The day's energy flowed in response, guiding movement and posture, fostering attentiveness. Meals were prepared and eaten slowly. Bread, butter, vegetables, small portions of meat, and fresh water provided nourishment. Every bite was deliberate, every swallow conscious, reinforcing the connection between sustenance and the rhythm of life. Eating itself became an act of mindfulness, fully integrated into the passage of afternoon. Outside, insects added delicate layers to the soundscape. Bees moved deliberately among flowers, birds called softly, and distant frogs or small mammals completed the orchestra of subtle, unhurried life. Nature maintained balance, alive with activity, yet flowing in perfect harmony with the deliberate human pace. By late afternoon, the day's work approached completion. Tools were returned, fields observed for final adjustments, animals tended with care. Movement slowed naturally, gestures became softer, and the body began preparing for the transition to evening. Every motion, though measured, carried weight and meaning. Light shifted again, warmer and softer, signaling the approach of dusk. Trees swayed gently, casting longer shadows across fields. Animals readjusted positions, settling in preparation for the cooler hours. Human activity slowed, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of nature. Conversations became quieter, more reflective. Observations about progress, the weather, or the approaching evening were shared gently. Silence was held respectfully, interspersed with the occasional soft word. The world contracted slightly in response to waning light, encouraging rest, attentiveness, and calm. Fires and lamps were prepared, small circles of light created deliberately. Each flame provided warmth and guidance without overwhelming the natural darkness. Shadows danced lightly across walls, creating familiar, comforting patterns. Movement inside the home was soft, deliberate, in rhythm with the fading day. By evening, the land had settled fully into quiet attentiveness. Humans, animals, and nature aligned in measured coexistence. Every breath, motion, and sound was intentional, grounded, and harmonious. The day progressed seamlessly into night, carrying with it the enduring rhythm of life before electricity.
Evening arrived without announcement, slipping gently into the spaces left by the retreating sun. The light softened first, losing its sharpness, then thinned into long amber threads that stretched across fields and walls. Shadows lengthened and merged, smoothing the edges of the world until everything appeared calmer, quieter, more inward. The air cooled gradually, carrying the scent of earth settling after a full day of warmth. Inside homes, movement slowed in response. Hands that had worked steadily through the afternoon now shifted to lighter tasks. Tools were cleaned carefully, wiped free of soil, and returned to their places. Doors were closed with measured care, not to shut the world out, but to gather warmth and stillness within. Each action was deliberate, performed with awareness rather than habit. Fires were fed gently. Small pieces of wood were added, coaxing steady flames rather than sudden brightness. The hearth became the quiet center of the home, offering warmth, light, and a soft, reassuring sound. Shadows flickered across walls and ceilings, familiar patterns returning night after night, comforting in their repetition. Meals were prepared with unhurried attention. Pots simmered slowly, releasing soft aromas that filled the space without urgency. Bread was broken by hand, vegetables sliced with care, water poured deliberately into cups. There was no excess, no waste, only what was needed, prepared thoughtfully, consumed with presence. Voices were low and calm. Conversations drifted easily, sometimes pausing entirely as people focused on the warmth of food or the glow of firelight. Silence felt complete rather than empty, a shared understanding that words were not always required. Each person existed comfortably in their own awareness, connected by proximity and rhythm rather than constant exchange. Children grew quieter as evening deepened. Their movements slowed, attention drawn inward. They listened more than they spoke, eyes tracing the dance of flame and shadow, minds absorbing the gentle close of the day. When they leaned against a parent or rested on the floor, it was with complete trust, bodies yielding naturally to fatigue. Outside, animals adjusted to the cooling air. Chickens moved into coops, settling together with soft murmurs. Cows shifted weight and lay down, breathing slow and heavy. Horses stood calmly, tails flicking once or twice before stillness returned. Dogs curled near doorways or hearths, bodies relaxed yet attentive to the subtle changes of night. The sky darkened gradually, blue deepening into indigo, then soft black. Stars emerged one by one, faint at first, then clearer as darkness took hold. The moon rose slowly, casting pale light across fields and paths, revealing just enough detail to navigate without disturbing the night's calm. Inside, lamps were lit sparingly. Small flames created islands of light rather than banishing darkness entirely. Corners remained shadowed, ceilings dim, the room held in a gentle balance between visibility and rest. Movement became slower, more intentional, as though each gesture were shaped by the quiet itself. Clothing was adjusted for warmth. Blankets were shaken lightly, beds prepared with care. The soft rustle of fabric, the creak of wood, the faint clink of metal, all sounds were absorbed by the evening, softened and made intimate. Outside, nocturnal life emerged. Insects hummed softly, frogs began their steady calls, and small mammals moved carefully through underbrush. The land transitioned smoothly, day life yielding space to night life without conflict or interruption. Every creature understood its place within the shared rhythm. As the fire burned lower, people gathered closer, drawn inward by warmth and shadow. Thoughts slowed, reflections surfaced naturally, memories of the day, observations of the season, quiet gratitude for rest and sustenance. These thoughts required no resolution, they simply existed,
acknowledged and allowed to pass. Eventually, one by one, people prepared for sleep. Lamps were extinguished, leaving only the glow of embers. Rooms darkened, familiar shapes fading into soft outlines. Bodies settled into beds, muscles releasing the day's effort, breath deepening almost immediately. Outside, the world continued its steady rhythm. Wind moved through trees with a low whisper. Leaves brushed against one another. The moon traced its slow path overhead. Darkness was no longer something to endure, but something to rest within. Inside, sleep arrived gently, not forced, not sudden, but welcomed. Eyes closed, thoughts loosened, and awareness drifted inward. The house held its occupants quietly, walls and beams absorbing sound, preserving warmth and stillness. The night deepened again, completing the cycle. Fires faded to embers, animals slept, humans dreamed. Time lost its edges, measured only by breath, by the slow turning of the sky. Life continued in perfect continuity, guided entirely by light and dark, effort and rest, whole, sufficient, and unbroken, just as it had been in the long, quiet ages before electricity.